Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, the most heat anywhere, the most heat information, conversation, consternation, all of that stuff. We got 10 different channels. We got stage shows, $2.99 per month. Click on the link in the description. Bypasses the Apple upcharge, and you can cancel at any time. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Prize Picks legal again in the state of Florida, and they keep adding back features. Now you can flex play again. Yes, we know a lot have asked about that. If you haven't joined yet, you haven't got an opportunity to do that. It gives you a chance to get back your money at certain times, kind of go halfway in. Another element of flexibility that Prize Picks gives you, can use the code 5 FIVE. You put down 5, you get $50 to play right away. And it's prizepicks.com, the Google Play Store, or the Apple App Store, the official fantasy partner of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yeah, 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs, where here's the thing, you can check the score, hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs, down to Biscayne. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick on 5 Reasons Sports. I got Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. This is one of a few episodes we're doing about Jimmy Butler's return with the Golden State Warriors. Check out the episode that I did with Om Young. I screwed it up on the pod. I did again. Om Youngmisik. I've known Om for like 25 years. Still can't pronounce names. I'm bad at all that stuff. Anyway, he's from ESPN. And he's posting a story about Jimmy Butler and the Draymond Green relationship and how things are working in Golden State. That's going up on Tuesday morning, day of the game. So I got a chance to speak to Ohm, and that'll be posted at the time the article posts. Also, do an episode with Brady Hawk about Jimmy Butler's comments in Miami. Been here a while. This is the way the schedule broke. Been here in South Florida and was at Barry University, and after practice addressed the media. But today, Alex and I are focused on something very specific. We've been hinting to you that the Heat were going to take the high road with Jimmy Butler's return. Doesn't mean everything's water under the bridge or anything along those lines, but the guy, was a big factor. Nobody can deny this. In them reaching 2 NBA finals and also a 3rd conference finals during his tenure. Things did not end the way that I'm sure that the Heat or the fans wanted it to. It seems to have ended the way that Jimmy wanted it to. He's with Golden State. Team has been playing extremely well. Some of his numbers are down, which is interesting because he's getting a lot of praise for things he didn't get praise for while in Miami. Actually, his shooting percentage, his efficiency is significantly down, but he's up with rebounds, up with assists, up with defensive impact again, and the team is winning since he's gone out to Golden State. But one of the things we've told you is that they were going to take the high road, and that was code for there's going to be a tribute video. Today, it came out from other reporters that there will be. I can tell you, don't go anywhere just before the game. That's where I can leave this. Okay, so if you're going to get a snack, use the restroom. Game's going to be on TNT, I believe locally as well. But don't go anywhere right before the game. This is not going to be at a timeout in the 3rd quarter or anything like that. They're going to do it. They're going to give him his flowers. And then they're going to get out of the way, and the fans are going to do what they're going to do. I'll start here with you, Alex, because the theme of this episode is what should be in that tribute video, which allows us to kind of go through some of his best moments. How do you think the fans will react to the video and then to everything thereafter?
Oof. Honestly, my first instinct is they're going to cheer. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be 100% cheers, but I think it's going to be mostly cheers, maybe 75-25, right, with 25% being the boos. Because, of course, it's not like everybody feels the same way. I think this has been one of the more obvious, for obvious reasons, polarizing topics, given that, their superstar is their former superstar is not on the organization anymore. and how ugly things ended. I think it's not probably. It might not even be 75% cheers. It might be a little bit more complicated than that. I'm not sure. It's hard to speak for what everybody's going to do, but I think like we've seen in other situations, I think there's going to be more cheers than not. I think that's kind of what we saw with other Heat stars. And for as much as people want to say, Jimmy isn't Wade or LeBron, which is just an obvious thing to say, he did a whole lot for this franchise, and I think that's going to be remembered by the fans. Like, those are some really awesome runs. That the bubble run in the middle of the COVID madness when it was early on there, what was awesome to experience. And then you got like the 2 long playoff runs after. I just think there's no way, even with how recently all that took place, that the boos overtake the cheers. I can't see it.
I don't either. I think that the opening response to him is going to be really, really positive. I do. I think and when you start to see these memories come up, that's going to draw that out even more. I don't know that everybody's going to be in their seats by then. That's the thing. The Heat, I don't know how they're going to handle this before the game, because typically they'll say, "Get in your seats. Make sure you're there." You'll see the messages from that kind of get out there through their various platforms. I don't know that they necessarily want to draw that kind of attention to it. So I'll just say, make sure you're there.
Maybe they should have had an 8 p.m. game for this one, but
well, I think they would like to be honest. I think they would like to, and again, TNT has the game. They added the game, but it's not the case. We know what traffic's going to be like and everything else, related to that. So, but you guys can pass on the Papa Johns for a little bit. Try to get in your seat beforehand, because I'm curious to see how they react. But I think it's going to be largely positive. The other thing to recognize is there are always Warriors fans in that building, even without Jimmy. That team has traveled, because this is the only time of the year to see Steph Curry. And we don't know that we're going to see Steph Curry, although he did go through some of practice today and was questionable. He's been dealing with an injury, and he missed the first game of their road trip. I'll just be honest. I'm more excited to see Steph than Jimmy, because I saw Jimmy play for 5 years. You don't get to see, you don't get to see Steph that often. And it is, and just watching Steph pregame where he's doing the trick shots and he's shooting from the tunnel, it's worth the price of admission, honestly. And he changed the game in a lot of ways. And we may never see another quite like him, even though obviously every kid in high school wants to play like him now. But I do think what we're going to see is very positive reaction at the start, and then booed every time he touches the ball. And then I think after, and that's typically the way that's happened with LeBron. It's happened with others. I think what happens after that is determined on the game. If the Heat are competitive, then I think most of the fans will get into it. Remember, LeBron could not win in Miami when he came back. Of course, the Heat also had Wade still on the roster at that point, and so fans were galvanized by Dwayne trying to compete with him still, which is something we missed for 4 years if they had all those great competitions against each other. If the Heat are not competitive in this game, then you're going to hear a lot more cheers for Jimmy, because the Heat fans are going to file out and the Warriors fans are going to remain. And then you're going to also hear some boos for the Heat team. I would advise the Heat to try to be competitive on this night, because otherwise I think it's going to be a pretty ugly scene in the second half. But I think that's typically the way that this will go. All right, let's start with the basketball part of this, because there's so much I think you could put in a tribute video to him, because he did become part of the culture down here. And I don't mean the Heat culture. I mean sort of the Miami culture, the Dominoes. I remember, him wearing, Matthew Tkachuk's jersey as, on the court during practice sessions while the Panthers and Heat were both going for the finals. He was not the one to host a ton of community events down here. He wasn't Zoe, he wasn't Dwayne, but he was out there, obviously, the coffee shop, the opening and all of that. But let's start. So I think they might mix in some of that stuff with him, with the community. I remember you and I, before we get to basketball stuff, you were there that day when we were up in West Palm, I believe Kaiser University, for his first training camp. And he was, I think that was also the day that Dion Waiters said some things he shouldn't have said. But Jimmy went outside and all the students were there, and
Yep.
Jimmy was mingling with the students, and it was like, okay, it felt very much like what things have been from Golden State. But like I believe you were there for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we may see some of that kind of footage, him interacting with fans, because I think whatever the thoughts are about him behind the scenes, and I've talked about, although not got too specific because it's their stories to tell. I've talked about some of the frustrations with him behind the scenes, dealing with him day to day, that he wasn't Dwayne, he wasn't Bam, he wasn't even LeBron in terms of behind the scenes, but in public, with the fans, he could be very gracious and out there and sort of, one with them. But let's get back to the basketball part of this. What are the moments you want to see in there?
Just got to go with some of the obvious ones here. You got to do the 56-point game versus Milwaukee. I don't care that it was a first-round game. That is one of the most magical first-round games of basketball I've ever experienced in my life. Like, that was truly like a transcendent experience, almost watching that, just because it was so unbelievable in the moment. Like, we all knew that, the Heat had competed with the best of the East before, but the way in which that happened, where he took over a game in which, he's being guarded by Drew Holiday, who's considered one of the best perimeter defenders now and at the time. You've got two awesome rim protectors in Giannis and Brook Lopez down there, and just a team that just seemed like such a Goliath, right? In the Milwaukee Bucks, even though like Giannis had his injury stuff and was maybe not 100% for the series, it was still amazing to see Jimmy put on that type of performance, because for all the stuff he'd done, he hadn't necessarily done that, and that was towards the end of the tenure. But it's easily one of the most memorable experiences, in my opinion, there, just because like I mentioned, it was very symbolic of I would say the Jimmy era as a whole, where it's just like you didn't see this coming. That's what that game was. And even though they had just been to the conference finals the season before, and even though they had already beaten the Bucks on their way to a finals in the past, like, it was still so unexpected. And it's like, okay, here's even more. And it was maybe the best performance he's ever put on in a Heat uniform, which is debatable because he's had so many great ones. And of course, like, it's a first round game compared to some of the other ones, but that experience, being there for that, the fans, the vibes, Jimmy's on the court performances, if it's not number one, it's up there for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a top 3 performance in Miami Heat history. Honestly, I think it's that. Um, it's Dwayne in the finals, which you could talk about the whole collective of it, but I always go to his game 3. But then uh, LeBron in Boston, which I was at that one too. And again, the difference here was the crowd pop. We've talked about that. Like, I've never heard that building that loud. And I think that is what Jimmy gave you. Is he gave you this belief that this sort of undermanned team. And I know as we look back at the era, people say, well, why do they have to be undermanned all the time, right? And that is sort of what led to everything that happened at the end. But he was leading a team beyond its means, really. And I think that possibility that he gave him, that edge, I point to other things that he did. Let's go back to the bubble. I think there's going to be a lot of bubble stuff in here. Him going toe to toe with LeBron, in 2020, where LeBron wasn't at the peak of his powers, but he wasn't that far off, to do it in a closed basketball environment. People always gave the Heat a hard time for, well, bubble champion, Mickey Mouse and all the rest of this stuff. That was pure hoops. Like, that's all that was. And what I always gave Heat and the Jimmy credit for, I know UD had a lot to do with this too, was they were like, what's unfair advantage for the Heat because they had this system and this program and this coach. Well, no, it's because they were good at all that stuff. It's because they were able to keep the players focused on basketball for the most part, manage it. And Jimmy, regardless of what else was going on, you didn't want to play him in the bubble. You just didn't. I go back to the TJ Warren thing against Washington, against Indiana, first round. And then you also look at, other situations, like, just again, the edge that he gave them, the timeout to Al Horford. I think that one should definitely be on there. All of these
That's
kind
in the
of
video.
moments. That's in the video. Give me some other ones that you think will be, but I think from a performance standpoint, to me, he might have played better in the 2022 season, where that shot that he takes, if he makes that shot, they go to the finals. I still think they beat the Warriors in those finals. I actually think if you look at that stretch of basketball he played, you could argue that was Jimmy's best basketball in Miami. But unfortunately, what happened with Josh Hart, we never got to see his best basketball beyond the Knicks series of that last playoff run. If we had, I don't think they beat the Nuggets anyway, because I just think they were playing against a team that was too good at that stage. But I would have liked to have seen Jimmy try. What else would you throw in there?
Definitely, whichever game it was, with the iconic picture. Like, this is just such an obvious one with him, hunched over there, looking exhausted. And, it was in the midst of being without his co-stars and Bam and Goran at the time in the finals. I think whatever game that was, because there was several awesome games there for him in the finals. You mentioned putting it all together as a collective. That's probably the best way of kind of, if you had to pick one moment from that finals to sum it all up, that's the obvious one. That's almost 100% going to be in the video, that picture, and performance against the Lakers against all odds. The fact that they even won 2 games, understanding that Goran and Bam didn't literally miss 100% of the series, but they missed the overwhelming majority of it and came back shells of themselves, when they did return and tried to come back from injury at the end of the finals. So Jimmy doing that and going, like you mentioned, toe-to-toe LeBron, when, again, nobody else expected it. It was a miracle that they were there in the first place in the finals. Absolutely nobody expected him to play at that same level as the guy considered to be, the greatest of all time. So I think that has to go in there. And, that moment with him hunched over will be the one that symbolizes, is the symbol for all of that.
Yeah, no doubt. And it had special meaning too, simply because of how Heat fans felt about LeBron at that point. And now that has softened, and now obviously some of the negativity has turned to Jimmy the way that ended. But to go like again, mano a mano with LeBron, and because they exceeded expectations that season, it actually affected the next season. Like the next season became a whitewash. You throw it out because they went so deep into the bubble and then had to come back on that short rest and all that. It kind of ruined Jimmy's second season with Miami, and then again we saw them get a number 1 seed the year after. But then not get to the finals, and they get to the finals after being a play-in team. And then last year was disappointing, obviously, with Jimmy's injury. I will go around for a few more of our thoughts on Jimmy before this big night on Tuesday night. Again, there is going to be a video. I know they've been working on it. We both know they've been working on it for a long time, and you're going to see it. And again, don't go anywhere before 7:45. That's all I'll say. Try to sit in your seat whether you're at home or not, however you feel about Jimmy. I do want to tell you about a great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, our friends over at All Pro Construction Builders. You can find them at allproconstructionbuilders.com. Our guy Danny and his team, it's really his family. They do such a great job together. 305-484-4429. 305-484-4429. You want to reach out to them to protect your house or place of business. We know in South Florida, it's hurricane season always. Officially a little bit later in the year, but why not do it now? You don't want to do this last minute. And if you mention 5 Reasons, you get 5.5% off your entire order. Again, it's All Pro Construction Builders. They use the best materials. They've got great reviews, and they're Miami people and huge Miami Heat fans. To protect your home or commercial building from hurricanes and storm damage, again, it's All Pro Construction Builders, 305-484-4429. I think it's funny. Some of Jimmy's best moments, even though he didn't really like dealing with the media very much, were in the press conferences. I wonder if they'll use like the stuff with Strus back and forth. The relationship he had with Goran, which I kind of missed that one. Are there any that come to mind for you there?
I was gonna say Goran for sure. Like that was such an easy duo to appreciate and just because I think the contrast of their personalities was just so fun. Like I would listen for sure to a Jimmy Butler, Goran Dragic podcast, whether just as a series or as a single episode. That would be awesome, right? Like I like the way that they play off of each other, so I could for sure see some of those moments there. But then the other one, when you start mentioning media moments, was very, very, very early on in that stint. In his stint with the Heat after they acquired him. I believe it was the Slam magazine stuff with Bam and Tyler. That interview was a pretty good one. And it was just kind of right in the beginning when things are still feeling fresh. And it's like, Jimmy, with your 2 young guys, and that's one of those that I think will probably be in the montage as well.
There's so many moments and things he said in that first year. His first press conference with Pat, he hit it out of the park. I remember Greg and I we did a podcast after that. We're like, Greg was like, he said right thing.
If you want to listen to the sentiments that he shared that day, you can just go and listen to all the stuff he's saying on Warriors.
Right, it's the exact same stuff. I asked him in a practice about 2-3 weeks after that about his feelings about Miami, and he looked at me. He says they allow me to be me, and now we're hearing the exact same thing in Golden State.
I don't think that was going to be in the video.
I don't think so either, but it's a much shorter time frame in Golden State. Like they got a 2-year window. Yeah. Here it was like 6 years. It's like you're trying to keep a relationship going for 6 years.
What's funny too?
Like the honeymoon.
after like hearing you say that, it's that when the Heat first acquired him, he was looked at as like this mercenary type. And it's like what you're saying is true. He's more really of a mercenary with the Warriors, with hindsight than he was with the Heat. He ended up spending 5.5 seasons here, and it could have been longer,
Yep.
If they would have, decided to pay him or whatever. Whereas like the Warriors, like it's strictly like you're saying, it's the end of his career. Everybody's on the same timeline. All the aging stars are together, and it's like it's just about getting the job done. But yeah,
and that's why I recommend everybody listen to the podcast with Ohm, because they got into the relationship with Draymond and how they kind of recognize that this is it, and they're going to have to do this now. Of course, the Heat has been in this 2 timeline phase for a little while, which Golden State used to be in. And now Golden State's kind of gotten rid of that and just said, okay, we're just going for broke at the end of Curry's career, which is what we said on a podcast on December 6th might end up happening, that Golden State would be the team that went after him, even if he wasn't their first choice. Durant was. There's so much that is said that he's saying now that he said before. I don't think they'll focus on a ton of that because they'll draw attention to it. I know he said at Barry University that if they do one, he'll watch it, but if they don't, it's no big deal. Very sort of typical Jimmy. What I'll always remember from covering him was everything was contrarian. Like literally, Jimmy could be playing at this really high level. He wouldn't let you give him credit for it. He could be playing poorly. He would challenge you on it. I remember asking him at, I think it was probably at FAU. So it was before this, not this season, it was season before, how many games he was going to play. And he looked me straight in the eye and he said 10 for the entire season. It just a professional troll. And
wow.
Again,
hinting at his future number with the Warriors.
Pretty much, right? Man, that was put that together. That was on his mind. There were it was never dull with him. Like as far as the media, relationship, we never knew when he was going to talk or not going to talk. It was never dull with him. I think the relationship ran its course both ways. I think that's kind of what we're going to look at in retrospect. But I'll just say this, and I'll close with this. I hope that he gets the ovation. I do. I hope he gets the ovation for the video because of what he brought to that place. When I was covering the Big Three and the Big Three was over, and then you went through Bosch's sickness and everything else and some lean years, not lean for other franchises, but lean for the Heat. And then, Wade coming back, but then, again, you didn't really didn't seem like it was going anywhere. You had all those contracts, Whiteside, etc. I didn't know that you'd experience any of that kind of joy, that crowd pop in that arena again, that nothing can compare to Dwayne, LeBron, and Chris, and Ray Allen, and Shane Battier, and everything else that had happened. And you did. You did in the playoffs. Like you felt he gave you a chance against rivals, against teams like the Celtics, against teams like the Knicks. And so I always give him credit for that. And then I hope they boo the hell out of him because that's what they should do. And not because he was problem behind the scenes or any of that kind of stuff or the way it ended, because he's not he didn't want to be here anymore. He's not one of Miami's anymore. We'll get to I don't think his jersey's ever going to be retired. I've been assured that repeatedly. I don't think so. I don't.
How are you going to throw that
but
in
I
at
think
the
they're
end
going to.
here?
But I don't. I've said it before. I don't. Just that's now unless things dramatically change in terms of the leadership of the organization. LeBron's will get retired before his. I don't think there's any question.
Okay.
But he's going to get his night, and I think that he should be wildly cheered during the video, and then like any other opponent, booed thereafter.
Can I make a quick closing comment here? Because I know you have to go.
Yes.
That I was gonna say something else before I get to that really quickly. If the Heat never retire his jersey, like for as much as I appreciate it that they're going the high road, as you say, with this video, it kind of softens the impact of that. Because that guy, like it doesn't even need to be said. It's obvious that he deserves to have his jersey retired at some point. Nobody's saying you got to do it, the moment he retires or whatever. You can control that. But they retired Shaq's jersey, didn't they? Like they've gotten over like worse stuff. And I think maybe you can make the case that this is uglier, like whatever. It obviously ended ugly. But I think that kind of like it kills the purpose of doing the, obviously like you should still do the video, but it's like it's almost kind of a half measure, right? If you're not going to eventually retire and honor that era, which he was at the center of. And other than that, the other thing I was going to say was that my final thoughts on what they should throw in the tribute video, they should show the 3 that didn't go down against the Celtics in Game 7 in 2022. And then right after that, show Game 7 the year after when the Celtics had come back from down 3-0 against the Heat, and the Heat finished that off. I think that would be, another good way of kind of putting together, something that sums up what that era was, because some obviously like all the Celtics battles, but just, going down in such a devastating way and then coming back up. And then it applies in a different way in 2023, the year after, when you have to, you Derek White ties the series at 3-3 with that game, with the game-winning putback, and then they come back and do it in Boston. Like that, those two things have got to be shown, and probably back to back, because I think it's hard to sum that up other than, like these moments that we've centered on here, I think do the best at putting it all together.
Yeah, because you were on the wire the whole time that he was here. You just never knew which way it was going to go, but he gave you a chance, and and that's pretty much what you ask for. As far as the retiring the jersey, again, I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. I think we got to wait for LeBron to retire first. LeBron to get retired in Cleveland, LeBron to get retired in LA, and then I think LeBron gets retired in Miami, and then
LeBron
after
should
that,
not
I
get
think
retired in
Jimmy.
LA before Miami. There's no way. There's no way.
Well, maybe before or after, but either way, I think you're waiting. I think Jimmy's waiting on LeBron at this point, if it happens at all. And by then,
It's
again,
so funny.
leadership of the organization could change by then.
It's always like Jimmy waiting on LeBron, man. Like his whole career, the Chicago stuff wasn't able to get past him. Over here, obviously, for different reasons. And here we are again, Jimmy waiting on LeBron.
I don't know that Jimmy would come to his own jersey retirement ceremony. He has to be here with the Warriors tomorrow. But I don't know that he would actually come. He'd probably be playing dominoes somewhere. All right, check out the other episodes, the one with Ohm, the one with Brady. Alex, myself, and Brady will be at the arena on Tuesday night. Greg and Adele will be hosting the post-game podcast. So we want to give this, the respect it deserves regardless of how it ended. And obviously we know people have their opinions on this, but it's one of the last interesting things of this regular season. So enjoy the festivities at the very least. Have a good day.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.